this room.
Alright, let's go.
So going off of Mr. Marr's question, my question is, could Gregor turning into a bug resemble some kind of psychological disorder brought on by stress that makes him perceive himself as a bug? And the quote is on, that I kind of got this from, was page 70, when Greta just seems to really be Gregor's caregiver, and it says she had to give a full report on what things looked like in the room, what Gregor had eaten, how he had behaved this time, and whether perhaps any modest improvement could be seen. So it seems to me like she would be a caregiver for somebody with some kind of disorder, who would be Gregor.
Well, one thing that it sounds like to me is, especially with how it says, she had to give a full report on what things looked like, what he had eaten, how he behaved, and if there was any improvement. So it kind of sounds like when you have a sick person in your family and they have to like rest and they're like confined to the bed, and then it's like it kind of sounds like actually exactly that, when you have a sick aunt or like a sick elder person, or like it doesn't have to be elder in your room, but you take care of them and then you report to your family whether if they're like doing better, if they're eating better, how they're looking. So kind of reminds me of that. So that's definitely a peek on how they look at Gregor, how they see Gregor.
So you think it's a psychological one too? You think it's just, or do you think it was physical as well? That was the question, right?
Yeah, or just,
Yeah.
Psychological.
I mean, I think it is psychological, and I think I agree with you on that. It's like it's a metaphor, and but what I love about the story is that it just keeps pushing it as a physiological change. It just keeps saying that he's a bug, and maybe he, and I'm speculating, but maybe he just like he's so sick or like so troubled that he kind of feels like a bug, and then his limbs are just like. He doesn't eat, so like he's like thinner, so like maybe his limbs look like bug limbs, kind of something. So it can be that too.
I think it's interesting that when we were talking about Greta's role, but how she has to like observe and report what he does, they almost make it sound like a science experiment, like she's watching bugs and like recording their behavior like a scientist would. But anyway, so. A quote that would be relevant to this would be, again, on page 23, when Gregor is thinking to himself, all this early rising is enough to make one soft in the head. So that could be taken as him alluding to possibly having some kind of like anxiety, something kind of dulling his mind from the work, possibly. If we're going to take this, if we're looking for evidence of this being like a metaphor for psychological problems, that would definitely be a good line to look at.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Because I was just looking at like 103, 104. It's the part where the boarders are like disgusted by his presence. Now, granted, if it was just psychological, and he was like really thin and decrepit and like acting like very odd, I could see the boarders being discussed in the same sense if they did see a bug. But like the descriptions, like they're like, I didn't realize in consideration of the reprehensible circumstances prevailing in this apartment and family, I give notice effective immediately that they're gonna leave. And something like that seems like if they did see a creature come out, they would act in this way. So that's why I think that could give evidence towards that it's not just all psychological, that he perceives himself as a bug and that everyone else does, but that he actually is a bug. And at the same time, I feel that he also could just look really terrible, and then they could be just like disgusted, like, whoa,
Yeah.
why are you treating your family member like this? It's just like
Yeah.
thin and sickly and crawling out of their room to listen to like the violin.
I mean, some psychological problems can definitely like manifest physical problems. I mean, like if you have something that leads to insomnia, you're going to lose drastic amounts of weight. You're going to look
Wide-eyed and
like
yeah.
a ghost. So maybe that's something that they're referring to there. A psychological problem kind of surfacing in a physical sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in my opinion, I would say that it is a metaphor for some psychological disorder. I mean, he's not eating. He's also like bedridden, so maybe it's something like depression, I would say.
But not, yeah, what's interesting is that, he never leaves the room, he doesn't eat, both of which are like, sometimes signs of depression. But the fact that they start taking the furniture out of the room, that what the story says is, okay, they take it out of the room because they know that he likes to crawl on the walls or whatever. But what it makes me think of is, okay, we have somebody who's like manically depressed in there. Let's take out all of the things that they can hurt themselves with, almost like they're creating like a padded room, like a padded cell for him.
Yeah.
In a way.
And just going off of what you said about the borders, I think
Yeah.
it could also be him perceiving them, thinking that he looks horrible.
That he looks horrible.
Yeah, like he might not actually, I mean, he might look horrible, but not in the sense of being a bug. Like he might just be perceiving how he
Others
thinks,
treat him.
yeah, or how he thinks they think of him.
Yeah, think of it.
I really like that because I think part of the problem here is that people treat him like a bug. And I talked about this in class the other day too, and eventually it's kind of like the self-fulfilling prophecy when they treat him like a bug, he just starts adopting the bug
Habits.
life, or like, yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
So like, and then he conforms into his newfound identity, and then they remove those things, and then he kind of likes it because now he can like move around easier, but then all of that maybe subconsciously, but then eventually quite blatantly just like lead to everyone identifying him as a bug and not as a person, and then that might create something, and that I think does create the idea inside his head that he just looks at everyone and like just sees them looking at him as if he's a bug in a lower life form. So I think that really explains that too.
I think it's interesting. Like a lot of these questions, the answers kind of rely on whether you look at it as like just an allegory, or if you take the story very literally. Because it's worth noting that like the story is told in third person. It's not Gregor necessarily narrating the story, especially after he dies. Like obviously he's not narrating after that, and it uses very literal language. Like he falls onto his back and he can't get up because his back is round and hard like a beetle. So it's kind of hard to reconcile. Because I think there's definitely symbolic elements, but whether in the story he's literally a bug, there's lots of evidence to go in favor of him literally being a bug.
Stick with yours. Question.
Yeah. Okay. So my question. Was, what does the story seem to be saying about the state of family in modern society? So the quote that I want to reference, or one of the quotes that we can reference, is in particular when his sister is basically saying that she's done taking care of him. So this is page 105, first full paragraph. Dear parents, his sister said, striking the table by way of preamble, things cannot go on like this. Even if you two perhaps do not realize it, I most certainly do. I'm unwilling to utter my brother's name before this creature, and therefore will only say, we have to try to get rid of it. We have done everything humanly possible to care for it and show it tolerance. I don't think anyone would reproach us on this account.
So what's the question?
So the question is, what, if anything, do you think Kafka is trying to say about family and how it's been affected by, I guess you could say, a society kind of formed by business? Because we remarked in class about how, by the end of the story, the family seems to represent seems to resemble the firm that Gregor worked for.
I mean, I feel that really does, because, like we said, kind of in class, but now in the business world, and you need to be like a worker. You're a cog in the machine. You need to provide, and I feel the same thing, especially in this specific family. Gregor was the breadwinner. He was the main guy, once he fell out of that role, the family kind of picked up the slack. But kind of actually relate back to your question, because he's so disturbed and literally and or figuratively, he can't literally do anything. Like he can't feed himself. Like he can't go get his own food. He doesn't leave the house. And I feel by the end, like the family is kind of like the firm where they're like, you aren't pulling your weight emotionally, economically, and we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do with you. We don't know what to do like in this context. So.
I really agree with that, and I just realized something that I haven't seen before. When she says we've done everything humanly possible to care for it and show it tolerance, I don't think anyone would reproach us on this account. She sounds more concerned with how people would react to them if they put it down than how it would turn out for him or the family. So that, I just thought it was really interesting. I just saw that she's just more concerned with how people would see them.
It's also interesting to note, Letty brought that up, that the word used for Gregor is it.
Yeah.
It's not him. So, like we've been talking about, a lot of this is about dehumanizing someone. I think that might be one of the greatest ones when you refer to your sibling, your son, as it rather than he. Especially when you're considering getting rid of, which can either mean they're going to put Gregor down or just cast him out into the world. So it kind of shows how far the family's come emotionally with him.
And just with that, I think using the word it, because it dehumanizes him, I think that also relates to some businesses where with sales, a lot of times sales is based on solely your commission. Like we talked about in class, they sometimes will just fire you if you're not producing, so they don't really value you as a person, they more value what you
Your
produce.
service.
So,
So, like, the phrase that kept coming up in my mind in class with this was conditional love. Now, ideally, right, a family would be, a business can have conditional love for you. Like, as long as you are performing well for the business isn't going to have a problem rewarding you. But ideally, right, I think we can all agree that ideally a family would have unconditional love. It wouldn't depend on your your physical capabilities to be accepted and loved by your family. But that's what seems to be happening here, which is the comparison to euthanasia is very easy to make, I think. Especially when it's such a. So the situation here is that he's turned into a bug. So obviously it's not going to be happening to anybody anytime soon. But
Hopefully.
But with situations in particular where say a psychological disease makes it so difficult to see the other person through it, like severe dementia, all this other stuff. If you're not in a family that is capable of having unconditional love, all arguments for keeping the person alive, really, you don't have anything to stand on. And it's kind of like commodifying, I don't know what the term is, but just like treating family members as like tools.
As
basically.
tools,
Like you're some kind of factory or something like that.
The way I saw it was that since through like the beginning of the book, the parents and Greta are not working, and that's all right. Like nobody seems to have a problem with that, or I guess we don't really see Gregor's side of that. But regardless, afterwards, when Gregor's not working, they seem kind of like angry at him, and I think that's because Gregor hasn't, in a sense, like you're saying, like it's like a business. He hasn't gotten to like a senior position where he could like lay around like the father was doing and like the mother was doing. So I think that it is very much like a business in that sense, and that's why they had no problem with kind of like killing him, because they didn't think that he would just keep.
The one last comparison I want to make is that we read, I think it was, page 23 again. He talked about how the other traveling salesmen live like harem girls, talking about how good the other traveling salesmen have it compared to him. And the thing that he mentions in particular is how he sees how these gentlemen may still be sitting at breakfast when he goes into work. So Kafka makes a big deal about the salesman getting breakfast when he doesn't, but he makes a similarly big deal about how Gregor's father sits around eating breakfast all the time. So the comparison, even before Gregor's father has seen him, the comparison between the other salesman and his father is there.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Up to my question, if you don't mind, real quick. Mine actually relates really closely.
Please,
to
yeah.
this. So mine is, why does it take so long for reality to set in for the family in relation to Gregor's situation? The quote that I was going to use is right after yours. That's why that actually fits. It is when Gregor's sister goes. Let's see. You just have to try to let go of the notion that this thing is Gregor. The real disaster is that we believed this for so long. But how could it be Gregor? If it were Gregor, it would have realized a long time ago it is impossible for human beings to live beside such a creature. So essentially, why does it take so long for this to be addressed in the family and in our own lives or in the world? Why does it take so long for families then there, like when their sibling or son hasn't turned into a bug, why does it take so long to like realize the gravity of like a situation like this? So,
I think that they were probably like just waiting for him to recover, and if we take like the metaphor for it being not an actual physical thing but a mental thing, that would make more sense. So they're just waiting for him to recover from whatever he's dealing with. I don't know, I just feel like they were in shock, I guess. If
that's why they didn't react. So
yeah, that's why
Yeah.
I didn't react until so far along.
Yeah, just holding out hope for the people that you love that they'll recover
Mhm.
because you want them to.
yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, the way I look at it, it's kind of weird in this sense because the way at the end when they're all talking about Gregor, they're talking about him like you said, they're waiting for him to get better, but also like they've been trying to care for him, which there's evidence throughout the entire story that they haven't. And there's so much evidence too that Gregor is slipping away from his humanity because he's not being treated like a human. He's being left in a room, which he says he loves now, which is all dirty and there's no stuff in it. He's eating rotten food, which is weird in itself. But it's also very dehumanizing, and I feel that, I don't know, that's part of my question. Is it kindness that the family, that's why it's taking so long, like for them to realize that something's wrong with them? Are they just blinded by like, that's our Gregor, like he'll get better? I don't know, like it's
Maybe it's shame. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
But maybe that's exactly what they say. Maybe they say it's our Gregor and he's this despicable creature, and then damn you for that. I can't. We can't live with this, and I can't. I'm really disgusted to call you my brother or my son or something. I mean, it doesn't say that in the story, but maybe something that is going on in their heads is that he did transform into this creature, and he actually, it even says that on page 107. If it were Gregor, it would have realized a long time ago that it just isn't possible for human beings to live beside such a creature, and it would have gone away on its own, which is a sister's quote, Greta's, and I think that's a big driving factor behind what she says and does, and how she's trying to get rid of it in this story. And like you said, they dehumanize him, which makes it easier for their conscience to, when he dies,
To
they're
let it
gonna
go.
say, yeah.
Yeah.
So it makes it easier.
And it's worth noting that we don't know how how his body is disposed of.
Right.
The charwoman, shoot, I don't remember the page exactly. The charwoman comes in and she's proud of herself of like how she managed to get rid of the body,
Mm-hmm.
and she keeps she's trying to hint at it, trying to get the family to ask her, but they like kick her out.
Yeah.
It's on, sorry, it's on 116.
What's this?
There's no need for you to go worrying about how to get rid of that mess in there, it's already taken care of.
Sorry, right.
And so if he is a bug, it's kind of weird. It's not as weird. But if he is a person, like we've been kind of like hinting at, that he's just psychologically messed up, perceived himself. That's very wrong.
Yeah.
Like this is their sick and mentally ill brother and son, who this charwoman is just, oh, don't worry, I got this. We get rid of him.
And I think the fact that she's called a charwoman brings to mind a very particular way of disposing.
Yeah, definitely, of course.
Disposing of garbage. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah, that actually brings me to my question. It was about Charwoman, actually, because I was thinking about how she comes in and it seems to me that she is the one person that treats Gregor like a being, like he has, he can think and
Yeah.
he can, he can react, and I feel like she's the only one that takes him seriously. So I was asking to myself, how would that apply to our everyday lives, where someone that's outside of the situation would come in, and how that changes the dynamics of the relationships that are between the people. It's like really vague,
Yeah.
but I don't know how else to put it. But every time, yeah.
It
So-
really is mysterious how she seems to pick up on it. Like, I mean, if I were to walk into a room and see a literal giant bug on the ground, I wouldn't be like, oh, you silly old dung beetle. I'd be like, holy crap, I didn't sign up for this.
Shut the door, run away.
Right, yeah. So I think that also kind of supports the idea that we had before of it being like a mental illness. The fact that an outsider is able to still have this perspective of like, well, of course it's a thinking entity.
Yeah.
At least that's what we are interpreting her lines as meaning.
Yeah.
The fact that she engages in like almost like playful dialogue.
Sarcastic.
Yeah, like calls him you old dung beetle. Like I don't spend.
Lightens the air a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't spend my time chatting up the cockroach in the corner. Also, like the fact that the cleaning lady wouldn't take it upon herself without having the situation explained to her. The fact that she wouldn't take it upon herself, like, oh, I'm the cleaning lady. There's a big old bug in here. It's my job to get rid of it.
Mhm.
Which she, for some reason, does not do that. Which seems to imply that she can
See Gregor for what?
see Gregor for what he is, which seems to imply that she has a perspective on the situation, and maybe it's just the family and Gregor that sees Gregor as a bug.
So this ties into part of the
But-
question. This is. Oh,
No.
you want to go?
Oh no, yeah, I was
Well-
just gonna rephrase the question as in how would that apply to a real life situation when someone's not a bug and
That's what I was gonna say.
Oh,
So I feel like when a family has a problem with someone, sometimes they have the blinders on, like we were saying, but like kindness or just history, and it takes that outside force to show the family
Yeah.
and anyone else what's really going on, because they don't have like in this situation, if again, still going with this idea that Gregor's like ill mentally. It takes her to come in, treat him like a conscious being, and in the end, she, like we said, she's the one who disposes of him. But the family, because of that action, kind of gets horrified, fires her, gets rid of the borders. It kind of moves on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So she's, I don't know, maybe she's like the catalyst for like their actions,
Yeah.
because she takes it upon herself to do what they couldn't. She gets rid of Gregor
That's-
after he died.
Yeah.
But
I think, oh, sorry. We're all trying to- I was just gonna say really quick,
Yeah.
I think she could represent some kind of like therapist or something
Yeah.
that they go and see to get some kind of outside opinion.
Mhm.
So.
I just think the character's so odd. It's like a last-minute introduction. We see so little of her, and we see two kind of contradicting things. We see that she's the only one that recognizes his humanity by the end of it, but then she's also, the last scene with her in it seems to hint at a kind of like grotesque way of her disposing of the body, and maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe that's just.
Oh, you mean when she starts
imaginations.
talking about it and the dad says stop?
Yeah, and the dad's like,
I don't
stop, and she's like, and she just talks about like how I disposed of that mess, you know, calling him that mess.
Yeah.
It's like we want her to be the one that is able to see his humanity, but then
At the same time,
at,
she's the
at
one.
the same time, not even a coroner would only refer to a human person as that mess.
And then, yeah.
Well, the way I took
Politician.
it was kind of like a sarcasm on her part, because the family sees it as a mess. It's a mess in their lives, and then I don't think she actually sees him as a mess, but she's really down to earth in this story, and even when she pushes him aside when he dies with the broom, and the mom goes, mom's all like emotional, and she's like, oh my god, don't do that. I feel like the family just like has this case of denial, and when you were talking about how they just like fired everyone out of the house, just like drove away in the sunset kind of something, they still deny, and they just like they want to just like get out of there, put everything back behind, and then just like pretend like that never happened, and just like go on with their lives. And the charwoman is like the only person to me that actually just like comes into a situation, sees it as what it is, and then just like tells the truth. And I think in that scene, in that little piece, when she refers to Gregor as a mess, I think it's just like a little bit of sarcasm when she says, "I clean your mess." Kind of
Oh,
something.
so she's kind
Yeah,
of like
alright.
accusing.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I had
that's how I
Yeah.
took it. But
That would seem a little more consistent with the way we all seem to want to read her character.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she just serves as an outside voice. Like, there's not that many people who see Gregor besides his family, and she is very, I guess, honest would be the word. I mean, the Borders see Gregor, and they're like freaked out by him, but she has a different take on him, which is also kind of odd. I thought maybe that could serve as like a metaphor for how like people like kind of like put people like in the hospital, like forget about them almost. I don't know, that was kind of vague what she was in my mind.
So what do you want to do here? Do you want to answer this question?
10 minute link to rehearsal.
Alright. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
we don't know if the other one uploaded yet.
Yeah, we don't know.
Well, let's just
I can
check.
check.
Put that out.
Let me
That's
pause
it.
it then.
Check. That is it.
Alright.
Third one.